Okay, welcome back in. This 32 and 32 series is continuing. This time I'm going out to the West Coast as we have the Seattle Seahawks, the team I will be reviewing right now. So you can see they finished second in the NFC West with a record of 10 and 7. The crazy thing is they finished with the exact same amount of wins as the Rams did. So who knows, had they maybe had a better record in the season, or maybe had they played. We'll take a look at the schedule here in just a second, but it's crazy to think that you finished the same record as your division rival, but you're out and they're in. So I'm sure they were pretty bitter, especially when it came to the last game of the season when you play against when they played against the Rams. So I'm sure they had a little hostile. They were a little hostile to say the least. So let's open up their full schedule from this past season. So they would start their season on a three-game winning streak, defeating the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Dolphins, respectively, only to lose the next three games to the Lions, the New York Giants, and the San Francisco 49ers. They would stop that losing skid against the Atlanta Falcons, but then they'd lose two games back-to-back to the Bills and Rams heading into their bye week. So they weren't playing that great at that point in the season. But I mean, this it's like a 50-50. Either come out of your bye week really good, really hot, or you're not. And they came out hot. They actually won their next four games. Three of them were divisional matchups. And then in week 15, they would lose to the Packers. And then the following week, they'd lose to the Vikings. They would defeat the Bears. And then they would, again, win against the Rams. They finished the season on a high note, winning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the last 8 games. But unfortunately, because of the poor start to the season, they would ultimately go on to miss out on the postseason. They didn't even get a shot at the wild card spot, which is crazy to think. Most times, if you finish 10 and 7, you're probably in the playoffs. But there were a lot of good teams in the NFC North this past year. Okay, so we'll take a look at the standings. You can see they finished with the same record as the Rams, but unfortunately, they weren't able to make the postseason. So overall, their offense, passing yards, they would finish in the top 10, eighth to be specific, with 4,020 yards. Receiving yards, they would finish sixth in the league with 4,379. First downs, they were 10th in the league. They had 103. Rushing yards, they finished 28th in the league, so they weren't that well on the ground with 1,627 yards. And points, they would finish 18th in the league with 375. The defense, well, at least they finished in the top 15 in most of the categories. Sacks, they were 9th in the league. They had 45. Interceptions, they were 15th in the league. They had 13. Forced fumbles, they were 14th in the league, ironically with 14. And tackles, they finished with 661, which was good for 12th overall. Field goals made, they had 26 field goals made, which was 21st in the league. Their field goal percentage was 86.7, which is good enough for 11th overall. Their extra points made, they had 37 extra points made, and their extra point percentage was 6th overall, 92.5. So unfortunately, they would miss an extra point or two during the regular season. All right, now we'll take a look at the individual stats. Geno Smith, the starting quarterback, would finish with 4,320 yards, finishing with a 70.42 completion percentage. His touchdown to interception ratio was 21 to 15, so not super, but obviously it's better to have more touchdown than it is to have picks. But when the margin's only 6, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's a great season. Jackson Smith Nagaba, if I pronounce that name correctly, I guarantee I screwed that up, would lead the team in receiving yards with 1,130. He had exactly 100 catches and 6 touchdowns. DK Metcalf was just 8 yards shy of 1,000, with finishing with 66 receptions and 5 touchdowns. Kenneth Walker III would finish with the most rushing yards on the team, 573. Again, not the best season for the Seahawks running game, on 153 attempts and 7 total touchdowns. Zach Charbonnet, I believe the other running back, would finish with 569 yards of his own on 135 carries and 8 touchdowns. On the defensive side of things, Leonard Williams, the defensive end, would finish with 11 sacks on the season. He had 37 total tackles and 1 interception. Julian Love, the free safety, would finish with 76 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions. He also led the team in interceptions with 3, you can see, and he also had 12 pass deflections. Looking at the special teams, Jason Myers, the kicker, would finish the season making 26 out of 30 field goals, which is 86.67% for his field goal percentage. And Michael Dixon, the punter, would finish with 3,756 yards on 76 punts, averaging around 49 yards a kick. So for the Seahawks, they missed out on the postseason for the first time, I think, or the second year in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on, let me check this again. Who did San Fran play last year in 2023-24? But they didn't play anyone in the first round. Second, this was probably the second year in a row I think the Seahawks missed the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't think they made it last year. Because the three wildcard teams last year, the Packers finished seventh. They played Dallas. The third team, because San Fran finished first. Oops. The third team was who? Because the third team was the Detroit Lions, and they played the Rams. And the fourth team would have been Tampa Bay, and Tampa and Philadelphia. So, yeah, so Seahawks missed the playoffs for the second straight year, and the third time in the last 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, it sucked that they missed it out. And honestly, I said this when I was doing my weekly videos, especially when it came down to the week 18 games, that I was hoping that the Seahawks and Rams game could have been that much more meaningful. They both finished with the same record at the end of the season, but I mean, imagine how much more intense the game would have been had they known it's win or go home, not knowing that it didn't matter for the Rams or it didn't matter for the Seahawks whether they won or lost the game, which is a shame because, like I said, division games are huge, but division games on the last week of the season are like that much more meaningful. And obviously, it wasn't meant to be. Seattle ended up going into Los Angeles, defeating them. So I'm sure they're happy that they came away with a win against the Rams. But the fact that you finished with the same record as that team and they're in and you're not, I'm sure it was a major pill for them to swallow. So heading into the next year, and again, I'll be doing my previews in the summertime for all of them because after the draft and the OTAs and the signings and all the other stuff, there's a good chance some teams might look a little different going into next season. But for the Seahawks, I think they'll finish with an above 500 record. They could finish 9-8 next year. Who knows? But I think like the top two teams in the NFC West, not trying to disrespect the Seahawks because they could easily win the division, which they could have done this year as well, are probably more than likely going to be the 49ers as long as they can stay healthy. And as long as the Rams bring back most of their core for next year, I think they might finish just slightly better than the Seahawks. But I still think Seattle will finish with at least 9 wins next year. But we'll see, like I said, once the training camp and the free agency and the draft is all done and what moves were made in the off season. All right, that's going to take care of this video for the Seattle Seahawks. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative at the same time. Until next time, and as always, take care.